Hey, Kate, it's such a pleasure to finally have this conversation. I know that it's entirely my fault having to reschedule a couple of times, but thank you so much for sticking with me because you have such a great topic to discuss. But before we start, you have such an amazing career. Can you share some more details about your background?
Well, hi. First of all, thanks for asking me. It's a pleasure to talk. Hopefully, I won't talk too much. I've got some nice things to share. I mean, my background has been varied, but I've spent about 25 years in workforce planning. First of all, working for a large insurance company, but then since the start of 2013, with my colleague Adrian, we set up our own company, and in those now 11 years, believe it or not. We've worked with some really fascinating organisations and people within them across all aspects of business within the UK. So we've done things such as insurance, again, with other companies. We've done back office functions. We've done on the road functions. We've worked with housing associations. Just recently did something with schools and particularly their cleaning staff, so you can go into quite a lot of detail as well. But we've had a long tenure with the NHS through ambulance services, and I think you interviewed and had a chat with one of my old colleagues from the COVID vaccination programme, Steve Allington, a little while ago, and that was a hugely fascinating piece of work to do, and also a great honour, and one that you actually felt made a national difference rather than a difference locally to the people you worked with. So yeah, you could say politely I've been around a little bit, round the block. This face probably tells you that, but actually it's been a fascinating and a great opportunity to work with different people.
And on that note, you're absolutely right. I did have a chat with Steve, and I actually asked him about you, and he had only positive stuff to say about you. So this is when I actually first reached out to you, probably a year ago. It
Yeah.
was because of my conversation with Steve. But we kind of know each other behind the scenes for approximately a year. And one thing that I have noticed about you and that I really like on your comments on my post is that you are spicy in the sense of you're absolutely not scared to say what you think and to showcase your expertise. And yes, you try to be kind and you are kind, but you would always get the message across, which is something that I think it can be lacking because people sometimes tend to be a little bit more politically correct and go with the flow rather than say what they really think about the subject.
Well, yeah, I think that is a compliment. I think with the role of working for yourself in a more consultancy type thing, you are given that opportunity naturally. But I think you also have to remember to be kind at the same
Yes.
time. You're being given the privilege to go and work with some people who've probably got quite frustrated and haven't been given the same scope and to change things that you have. However, they've got an awful lot of information, feelings, and thoughts about what they've tried, and actually it's a great opportunity for them to actually break down those barriers as well through helping you. So yes, I do tend to have that side to my nature, but also I do have a kinder, softer side. But I will always encourage people, get off the train at the station, look on the platform, see where you're going, and just make sure that's still the direction you need to be heading in. It's very easy to let others direct that for you and just to stay hidden, and you know, that's fine. But if you're not happy with where you end up, you have to take a certain element of responsibility for that.
I love that. And actually, even before we kick off the official topic, I'm so happy you say, remember to be kind, because we're dealing with a lot and working in resource planning is already difficult enough. You're very pressured from a lot of sides. So sometimes we tend to get frustrated ourselves and maybe even take it out on others, but keep it kind. It's always the message.
I think so. I've always had a mantra that you have to have a thick skin to be a resource planner. You can never be right. You can only be wrong, and etc. etc. But I think at the end of the day, you can also be a part-time therapist as well. You can to change that to listening to people to help understand why they feel like they feel, and also you're privileged. You possibly have a solution that could help them. but that does depend on having a strong relationship with them, a two-way relationship.
I think you placed it perfectly fine as an introduction to our topic, and this is something that you actually came up with, and I think it's super important to talk about. And it's about, is it possible, even though you're following all the steps correctly and you're doing everything right and your numbers turn out perfectly fine, is it still possible that you fail in your delivery of workforce management and or resource planning?
Yes, and it's something I sadly can't offer you a perfect solution to. Hopefully, in the next few minutes, we can go through a few examples and some tips that might break the status quo. I think you're very right. It is very easy to fall out with people. It's very easy to put a fence around what your role is and what their role is. And as the plans and the numbers get handed over, they inevitably get changed. Who's responsible for that? Why have they done it this way? These are things that I familiarly face, and it is very difficult to find some solutions. So hopefully there's a few little things in here. I don't apologize if some people have heard them before. I can't claim intellect across all of them, as you'll find out, as I've used a few famous quotes and things that people that you'll all know have actually said and would recommend doing. So like I say, hopefully there's something there for everyone just to at least try.
And on that note, I don't mean to throw you under the bus right now, but I have a big question for you and something that deeply, deeply bothers me. And it's a hot topic for me at that moment. I wanted to ask about your view. Do you think in contact centers in general, people are unable to take responsibility or have hard time taking responsibility?
I think it's a mixture of both, if I'm perfectly honest. I think if you look at it from what's asked of them, there are situations where there have to be guidelines that you work within. Okay, so regulations, laws, those types of things. That doesn't apply to every role. It doesn't apply to every question or query that you would encounter. It then reverses round to how equipped and how comfortable do you feel giving a reply. Do you have fear that the consequences of not quite getting it right or having it misunderstood? It's not as simple as answering a question, because a lot of the time customers don't know what question to ask. And that's really, really hard. We don't fit into pigeonholes. Situations in life simply don't. There are some things that you can really do to help yourself. This is a bit off piste. One of my favorites has always been that when somebody says at the end of a conversation, is there anything else I can help you with? What they mean is, bye-bye, I've spent enough time with you. What they should do is understand what somebody wants to say to them. So what's the customer saying to me? Let them have their say. Reiterate to them your understanding, and then say, is there anything else I can help you with? Because at that point, they may say no, so you just know it's a one. You've got the query, you know what you're doing. If not, they could ask something else which actually helps you answer the first piece. That goes very much against how 99% of conversations go, though, but it is a very interesting one. And it actually does help people formulate their answer, and it's fine to pause. You know, as human beings, we hate it when we're having conversation and there's a pause in it. Do you know what? If you've asked a question, give somebody the opportunity to answer it. And if that means being quiet while they do so, because actually the emphasis is on them to answer it. I'm not saying sit there for 5 minutes in silence, obviously, but you know what? How many times, and just try this yourself, even in your family, ask a question, get asked a question, don't answer it, and see how quickly somebody answers it who asked it in the first place. And I guarantee they'll last less than 30 seconds before they answer their own question, or they add more and more detail and make it more complex. So yeah, I think it is a tough environment. I don't like to use the word fear, but I do think that comes into it. And you know what? How many times do you give the same answer to the same set of circumstances? Because those circumstances differ.
So on that note, what do you think? Is it from a resource planning perspective? Is it that we are struggling getting the message across to senior stakeholders, or we're just being ignored? Where do you think the problem is?
I think we've got, I've picked three main areas. Hopefully we'll get through them, and I will be fairly quick with them. Number one is an over-reliance on numbers. Okay, and I'll chuck data into that situation as well. That might feel a little controversial to some people, but I'm certainly not saying you don't need them. Yes, you do. And you need the accuracy within them. But do you need to lead with them? That's a different question. Number two is a classic: overcomplication of messages. Okay,
Yeah.
corporate speak, I shall call it that just for this point. And then there's another one in there, which is your overall credibility. Are you the go-to people to get something done? And I'm going to use a quote, and I'll give to you a link to YouTube so that you can go and watch the video it's taken from, because I'm not going to sit and read out the transcript of it for sure. But actually, there's a really good pertinent message in there that I think all us in workforce management really should pay attention to.
Okay, that's brilliant. But let's start off covering these 3 points. Like you mentioned, over reliance to numbers, and
Yeah,
I tend to agree with you. And I always think that data can potentially give you all of the answers. Everything is in there, but data also mean behavior in a lot of cases. So if you're missing that human touch, if you're missing the human aspect, that data often is a dead end, in my opinion.
yeah. Now then, I've got some notes on another screen, so if I keep looking to that, I'm just cross-referencing them. But I
Tips
think
are
one of
more
the things
important. Don't worry
just to
about it.
remember about data and numbers is if you lead with data and numbers, it can give the illusion that you've got much more certainty than what you have. Okay, now why is that important? Well, in the world of forecasting, whether you're forecasting customer contacts, you're forecasting what you need to do to anything that's a prediction, basically. My colleague Adrian very clearly says you'll either be lucky or wrong. I wouldn't quite go to a customer and say that, but it actually can give the illusion that you can give them an absolute future. You can predict the future, but what you're trying to do, and this is another colleague's, you're trying to help people prepare for it. So there is going to be a level of variance in there. And your job is really to help them understand whether that variance, whether they can cope with it, or whether they have to take action to cope with it, or whether they can't. Okay, because you know what, there are times that you will not hit your service metrics and things like that, but you're actually helping them understand why in the first place. Now, if it's a one-off incident, you probably can live with that. If it's a regular occurrence, then you need to start doing and taking actions to do it. So you're actually looking for taking this data and actually making it into, and we often call it a story, but you're making it into something tangible that your customer knows what they need to do with it. Okay, if you give them a block of numbers, even with the best analysis saying why it is what it is, you haven't helped them do anything about it, have you? You've actually given them a problem. Now, I don't know anybody who thanks anybody for actually giving them another problem or reiterating the problem they already know we have. And that's a lot about credibility. So we'll come to some solutions to that bit later on. So I never say data is not important. You do need to know your numbers. You need to go through all the types of process, the methodologies. You choose what works best for you, but always remember the future isn't a certainty. You have got to be able to feel comfortable in that environment in workforce management and actually help people make the decisions or line up the decisions. Some people refer to it as a playbook. I don't really mind what you want to call it, but don't give things as a certainty. I used to work with somebody who used to get a number for his forecast and then put some more digits on the back so it looked like it was really worked out thoroughly. You worked that one out. People do mad things. They really do.
Okay. Oh,
So that's one
interesting.
thing. Don't over rely on numbers. They sit behind you. You don't sit behind them. It's your part of
Mm.
your job is to make sure people understand. And you don't have to go through the whole suite of things. What's the important topic to them right here, right now? That's probably the one to focus on. How do you know? Because when you last spoke to them, if it's a regular discussion, hopefully you picked up that you'll discuss it in more detail next time. This time.
I love that, and it is such a perfect bridge to your second point. And I feel like there is a huge overlap, and it's a natural flow with overcomplicating your message. And I've done that myself so many times. When I started working in resource planning, I was going to my contact center manager and operations manager, and I'm gonna show my sheet and all the formulas and numbers, and I just couldn't understand why they're not taking me seriously. I was so frustrated.
And that's how the relationship starts to break down, isn't it? Because you aren't talking the same language. But everything you've said there, I've done it as well, and I've heard colleagues do it. It's absolutely right. That's your world, isn't it? That's the world that we work within. That's not their world. As a customer, and they are our customers, we have to understand what it is going to motivate them, and what is actually going to get them to draw their attention to actually doing something that they need to do, or having confidence that they don't. And that is not an easy task.
It's not. I think this is potentially one of the most difficult tasks, to tailor your message to your audience. And
yeah,
they are not talking to us about their budgeting and all of their conversations with their stakeholders, because we wouldn't understand that, and we wouldn't necessarily know how to factor that in our work. So we shouldn't do the same to them. But this is, for me as a planner, was the most difficult thing to understand, that if I want to advance my career, I should stop focusing on the sheer numbers and start working on influencing the others with the numbers that I have.
And feel comfortable when somebody asks you for your opinion. Okay, if they want your opinion, that's a huge compliment, because what they're saying to me is, don't do the numbers, tell me what you think. Now, you put a post up a few months ago, didn't you? And you called it gut feel, didn't you? And I thought there was some really interesting comments made on that, because I thought what you're actually saying there is absolutely true, because that gut feel, call it what you want, that is all based on your knowledge, your previous learnings, not just from this job, but from other jobs, your understanding of people, how customers may react, and all of these things. It's a multitude of things that go way beyond numbers. Numbers can prove them, but they can't actually explain them. So I think there is room for that. How you explain it is probably a little bit more difficult, isn't it? Which is why we're looking to say, we'll start feeling comfortable with not leading with numbers. Certainly don't sit there and read a report out and just literally tell them what's in the graphs or in the number table. That's not what they've come to listen to. You need to take them to the most important one, and the message that delivers, the consequences of action or non-action, this type of thing. Get a conversation going with them. Ideally, give them some idea of what to do.
And exactly talking about that, how do we build that credibility that you mentioned as your third point? Because it's, for me, that's also one of the things that many planners are getting frustrated, because they feel ignored, they feel not listened to, they feel like their work is not important. It is, it absolutely is. But sometimes also delivering the message in the wrong way leads to lack of credibility.
Yeah. Now, there's a very interesting video about this on YouTube, and I'll give you the link afterwards, so you can, when you publish this, you can put the link in your explanation. It's only about a minute long, and it's with the former US President Barack Obama, and he is asked a very simple question about credibility, and how you gain credibility yourself. So if you imagine yourself a younger you just starting out, or even in your own current position, and you want to make a change to make things better, he said, what are the people who are the people that people go to? And he very clearly says, the people who get stuff done. He said, now there's an awful lot of people who can requalify, can add more detail to a problem, to a challenge, than there are who are going to say to you, leave that with me, I'll get that done, and I'll come back and explain how I've done that. Or can lead with, these are my suggestions on what the things that you should do to address that. And it sounds very simple, but just sit back and think to yourself, how many times has somebody come to you, you've looked at a report, it hasn't really told you anything, because this isn't just the verbal side, it's the written side as well. how many times have you looked at it and thought, well, what is this telling me? And you've also had to struggle to find, well, what should I do about it? Or as one manager said to me, and you're going to have to excuse, he said, this is a no shit Sherlock moment. In other words, I already know that. Why have I sat here for 30 minutes while you've told me what I already know? I need you to sit here for 5 minutes to confirm what I know, and 25 minutes to tell me what should we, and have a discussion about what we should do about it and what good would look like. What's the art of possibility here for us to
You
work with
know,
me?
one of my tips on this note that I learned the hard way is also not to take things personally, because
Yeah.
I feel like the more senior role someone has, the more likely it is to be very direct, because people have limited time to get things done. So
Yeah.
their expectations of such conversations is, tell me what I need to know so I can go and make everything work for everyone. So tempers gets a little bit short when the fuse is short when we're in such situations. And I've been in many situations when I now know that I lost, wasted someone's time, and I felt offended based on their reaction. But their reaction is not personal. They are just operating with very limited amount of time to get things done.
Absolutely. And their attention to your presentation is far less time than it
Yes.
took you to make it. And you just need to understand that. So you really have got to, and we'll look at this before we finish, there's some other things to do there. But what Barack Obama says is, to be the go-to person, you have to be the one with the solutions. Don't always seek out the big projects and the glamorous pieces. When you stop and you add together all the little bits that somebody's doing and they're responsible to it, that can often be more than the big glamorous pieces as well. So don't always fight for the golden egg. Look for some of the silver and bronze ones, and the more of those you collect, you will have a greater impact. Obviously, I can't put it quite in the words, and I've taken more than a minute. But it is worth just watching the video, because you know what? That is somebody who, when he was president, was top of the pile, had so much information given to him. He could not possibly ever have processed that all himself and made all the decisions himself. So he relied on trusted people to tell him what the decision should be. Just think
I,
about that. Which person do you want to be?
I
I
love
want to be
all
that
of your
trusted person.
points, and
Yeah,
such important tips that you have mentioned, and I feel like we can continue this conversation forever.
yeah.
But I already have another topic for you that I have created in my mind since we started speaking. But on that note, this is a wrap. Thank you so much, Keith. I absolutely love your tips, and I can't wait to have follow-up conversation with you.
I'd be a pleasure.